Hello, fans of baseball fans. I'm Paul Williamson. This is Fantasy MLB Today's Sports Ethos presentation brought to you by FanDuel. As always, it's an honor and a privilege to give y'all this podcast, give y'all some information advice to help you win your leads, give your teams a boost. Before we get the conversation today, we have Ariel Cohen of the ATC Projections joining us to talk about those projections. First, we're going to remind you to follow me on Twitter at PaulW_34. That's at PaulW_34 to get more of me. Ask me questions, hit me up. Let's get ready for 2026. Same thing on Bluesky. No underscore there. Paul W34 there on Bluesky. Also, make sure you follow the Sports Ethos Fantasy Baseball accounts at Ethos Fantasy BB on Twitter, at Ethos Fantasy MLB on Bluesky. Get updates all of our content with the draft guide coming out. Sleepers of Buzz came out this past week. Starting pitchers came out today. Release pitchers tomorrow. Of course, we have the blurb feed popping every day. We get updates and all the offseason moves happening to get you ready for 2026. So make sure you check us out. And also, please rate and subscribe to the podcast. Please rate and subscribe to the podcast. We'll push out. I'll love you forever. Also on YouTube at Sports Ethos on the Sports Ethos channel. Make sure you subscribe there as well. All right. With all that lovely housekeeping out of the way, let's bring in Ariel Cohen of ATC. Ariel, thank you so much for joining me, man. How are you doing?
I'm doing great. Thanks once again for having me.
Yeah, man, absolutely, absolutely. I'm glad you're safe and warm and out of the snow and talking baseball with me, man. That's awesome to hear. So tell me a little bit about how you got in. Well, first, make sure you follow Ariel at ATCNY, at ATCNY on Twitter. He is also the host of the Beat the Shift podcast, FSWA Podcast of the Year winner last year. Congratulations on that as well. It was an honor to be nominated alongside you. So big congratulations on that. And you're also the creator of the ATC projections. So just general background on you, sir. How did you get into projections and what interests you about them?
And congrats also on being nominated. It's pretty amazing. We're actually waiting just a couple days from now to hear about next year.
Yeah.
I got into projections just because I was playing fantasy baseball. And I'm a math guy and I do models for my insurance company all day long. So what can I do to help myself win? Well, I might as well do some projecting. And when I started, I really didn't know the right thing to do, what to project, or maybe if I wanted to follow another projection, which one were better. So I sort of took them all and I averaged them together and I said, all right, let's go with this one. Over the years, though, I've learned that some projections are better for homers and some projections are better for stolen bases. So just averaging them straight in isn't as effective as looking and see which one's better. And if something is better in one category, I take more weight of it than the other, and so on and so forth. To me, it was the playing that got me into projecting, and I guess my method works since it's now being popularly used all over the place. It's up on Fangraphs, Yahoo, RotoWire, RotoBall, and a number of sites. So there's something to it, and it helps me even today win this league. I mean, I won 3 different leagues in the NFBC last year, and I'm still using my own projections. So there you go.
Yeah, no, you are obviously a highly successful fantasy baseball player, and I use ATC a lot to kind of back check myself because what I'll do is I'll go through and do my own little ad hoc projection kind of things, how I think a player is going to do, and I'm checking my work against ATC. I say, all right, what does ATC say he's going to do? And then if I'm way off, then I'm going to reevaluate. I'm like, all right, well, why do we have these numbers for ATC, and why do I come up with something different? And sometimes I'll agree, sometimes I'll disagree, and I'll change or whatever, and I'll adjust from there. But ATC for me at least is kind of the barometer, is kind of the gold standard. It's the all right. If ATC says I'm way off, well, then I really need to double check myself because it's because like you said, the aggregation I think is amazing because, for me personally, I like to check myself. I do my own research and then I'll check myself. And so being able to go to one spot to get the aggregation of all the projections then is an incredibly powerful tool. And I love that you do it, man. So on behalf of the fantasy baseball community, thank you. It is, you're doing fantasy baseball God's work, so to speak, on this front. So definitely
It's God's work, but thank you.
That's fair. That's fair. Right on, man. Well, so for those of you that might be listening, I will post the link, but there is a link to a Fangraphs article that I think you write, and it has an amazing job of explaining some of the things that we're going to be talking about on the podcast today. And I'll post the link whenever I promote the podcast. So any listeners might want to follow along. We'll be kind of following this article entitled ATC Volatility Metrics So let's begin at the very beginning here. Process risk versus parameter risk. Ariel, do you think you'd explain that a little bit? What the difference between the two are?
Yeah, well, first of all, to note that one of the powers of aggregation, the way that I put together ATC projections, is that it comes from a lot of other projections. And yes, I get my ATC numbers, which is a point estimate. It's there to represent the average, the median, or however you want to call it, but something in the middle of all the projections. But what it doesn't tell you just from identifying the numbers is it doesn't tell you how variable or how much the projections disagree with each other. It could be that all the projections agree with one another, or it could be that projections are totally disagreeing and we're picking something in the middle, right? So because I do it my way, I can color that for you and in some of my metrics. And also there might be some projections for some players that are pretty in agreement, but there's one outlier projection up or one outlier projection down. So the ATC has released a couple of different volatility metrics to capture some of the color around how the projections sit around the ATC average. And you talked about process risk and parameter risk. See, there's what makes when a player is projected for 35 homers, that's just an estimate of his true talent. But in any one year, it can be different. Process risk is he's going to be he might have 40 home runs, he might have 30 home runs, but because of it's just the fact that we're playing 162 games, right? Maybe there was, he got sick one week, or maybe he was really hot one week and cooled off later, or he had an injury or whatever. Anything can happen in 162 games. But if you played a million games, that true talent would eventually be realized. Cal Raleigh had 60 homers. Is that really his true talent? Probably not. He was very hot this year. Maybe his true talent is 48 homers. So one year, this year, he's sort of at the top of his range. He had 60. Maybe he got hurt one year and he would be only 10 homers, right? But the fact that you have 162 games, that's process risk because there's just, you're not playing a million games. You're playing a set number of games and anything can happen in a given season. I mean, stats don't converge over one year. It takes a couple of years for stats to converge to somebody's true talent. Now, aside from process risk, which is natural and inherent no matter if you know your true talent 100%, is parameter risk, which is how do we know that 35 homers is his true talent, right? How do we know that it's not really 40 and we're getting process risk on top of that? How do we know it's not really 20? Parameter risk is the risk that we don't know exactly what the true talent is, and we never do know what it is. But what ATC helps with in parameter risk is that it cuts it down. Because we have different views with different projections coming in, it cuts down the risk that, we don't know what the true talent is, right? It gives you a little bit more convergence onto what it is. Plus, it also quantifies it. When you're talking about the ATC volatility metrics, it tells you the variance around that true talent, and that is a way to quantify how much risk we have in his projectability, so on and so forth.
Right on, awesome. And man, that's another reason why I love these projections because you do the math work behind it that just goes way over my head. I was a journalism major in college. I'm better at writing than I am math. And so having someone like you do this kind of work for me in the community is incredible because you're right. With the aggregate, you're taking a bunch of system, a bunch of numbers and averaging it out and then figuring out how to deal with the outliers, how to, how to process, how to like intake numbers that might not fit the average and kind of quantify the risk there. I think is incredible. So we'll go right on into the first I guess the first of three type of volatility school skew and dimension. We'll begin with volatility, ATC, that's abbreviated VOL. What is it? And you call it a second order statistic, so explain that as well, please.
Sure. I mean, by the way, when I first came out with the volatility metrics, I had these very mathy names. It was called Inter SD, Inter SK, Intra SD, and it just sounded like mathematically gobbledygook, which I guess sounded cool for those who like that, but I'm not even geeky enough to appreciate that. So I needed
Right.
a little bit better name. So I called it volatility, skewness, and dimension. VOLSKEW and DIM. Volatility, which is the first of the volatility metrics, measures the standard deviation of a total player's value around the ATC average. So if you take the ATC projections and evaluate it in a 15-team league, 5x5 format, it comes up with some dollar amount. And the volatility around it is what other projections would say. So if a player is $15 according to ATC, you know, it's the standard deviation. Maybe some projections have $17, maybe a 14. It's the standard deviation around it. When I mean second order statistic, it's a mathematical term, is that an average is you add up everything and divide by a number. But when you're dealing with standard deviation, you're adding up the difference of squares, right? Technically it's the difference between yours and the mean squared. You sum that up. So second order just means we're dealing with squared terms.
Okay. Awesome, awesome. And honestly, I didn't really know that. I took a stats class in college, about 15 years ago, and so some of those terminology is kind of coming back to me a little bit. But I'm glad to get that clarification to kind of get an understanding. Now we're about to kind of dive into some specific players, and so just to note, I will be referencing NFBC Draft Champion League ADP whenever I say someone has an ADP. That's where I'm referencing. But the first question I want to ask on specifically on volatility is I noticed that a lot of starting pitchers, guys like Cade Horton, Dylan Cease, Ryan Pepiot, Mackenzie Gore, all these guys have way higher volatility numbers than hitters, because I think the highest pitcher one is Tatsuya Imai. He was like 7+, and then the highest hitter is Jack Caglione, is under 5, like 4.58. Does that type of volatility kind of change your draft strategy in terms of you maybe fading pitchers more, or making sure you're really aggressive and targeting the ones you want, or anything along those lines?
Not really in terms of whether I do hitter versus pitcher. I mean, in general, we know that pitchers are more variable. We know that their outcomes are way more variable. I mean, you can predict the top hitters with much better certainty than you can predict the top pitchers. So I think that sort of describes the variability. And we know that we draft hitters usually ahead of pitchers in general. So I think that it just describes what we do, not that we do something because of the numbers. And yeah, I definitely, that's exactly what you'll see. You'll see hitters with a range of, volatility anywhere from 0 to like 4 or 5, and pitchers maybe even up to 8, 9 even for certain ones.
Yeah, absolutely, absolutely. So let's dive into I just mentioned Jack Caglione. He's one of the highest volatility bats per your ATC projections, going at 223 on his ADP, the third overall outfielder. Is that a price that you're willing to pay, or you in or out on Caglione specifically?
Well, first of all, also to note that you'll find that players who are rookies and very early sophomores who don't have a lot of a track record, you're going to definitely find more disagreements on projections. Players who've been around for 7 years, you're going to find very little disagreement with projections because you know what his true talent is. So that's something you'll notice also. You'll also notice that injury-prone players or players coming back for an injury, you also have a much higher volatility, as some projections are going to say, he'll be just as good as he was before the injury, and some he's not. So that's just something that you should look out for. As far as Jack Caglione, my ATC projections in a 15-team 5x5 format evaluate to about a $2 player, and he's going for some $5 players. So generally speaking, I'm out on that. When I'm spending my last dollar or two at an auction, or if I'm in my, 17 through 23 rounds of a 23-round league, I'm trying to get somebody who is maybe a $7 or $8 player that I can buy for $1, not the reverse. I'm not trying to spend $5 to get a $2 player. So I'm pretty much out on Caglione at that. I mean, Caglione has not shown a batting average that's really that usefully batted. 157 last year, and I'm projecting him for 232. Pretty much no steals, and it's very variable whether he's going to stick in that lineup as it is. He's got a good strikeout rate, so I think there is batting average upside, but it's not like he's hitting, 30 homers. He'll probably stay in the team. So to me, he does not have enough reason for me to draft him, and you'll probably not find any of Caglione on my team.
Right on, right on. Well, if anybody listened to my Oh Unheard podcast, was it last week or 2 weeks ago? I'm a little more in on him. I like the strikeout rate. I love the barrel rate and stuff like that. And for me, whenever I'm drafting, I do like to take a little more late round risk and be a little more safe early. So I'm a little more in on Caglione. I will say this though, it will depend on my draft strategy in general. I mean, if I don't get my highly sought after safe players early on, I do recognize the risk with Caglione here, so I might not be drafting him in that scenario. So it really does kind of depend on my draft strategy, how my early rounds go. It will decide if I'm going to get someone like Caglione or not. Because you're right, there is no track record here with Caglione. We haven't really seen it yet. I'd imagine for me personally, I might have him more on my 12 team leagues. I will my 15 team leagues are deeper because I think you can take on added risk later in the draft. He's already going outside of pick 200, so he would be one of your last picks in a 12 team league. So it is kind of draft dependent, but I think in general I might be a little more in on him than you, and might even on most. I might be a little higher on the market or not. But again, like I said, this might have a lot to do with my draft strategy, how my early draft goes, because you're right. There is a lot of volatility with Caglione. Let's move on to the next. The arm with the highest volatility here is Tatsuya Imai. I'm an Astros fan, a big homer here. I would love to hear your thoughts on Imai and whether or not you're in at him. Is overall the 76th pitcher being taken, pick 175.
Yeah, well, again, you can probably guess that because he's never thrown a major league inning and he's coming over and it's a Doodle League format, there's just terrible uncertainty around what he can do. Now, by the way, having a lot of uncertainty doesn't mean that it makes it a worse projection, right? If you're low down, if you're getting a player for $1 or $2 at the end, you might want to have a lot of uncertainty because you're shooting for upside, right? If you're high up, you're probably not going to want that uncertainty because you're shooting for the highest floor. I mean, in my projections are all over the place. We've got projections that have him like 120 innings. We've got projections that have him 170 innings. We've got projections in the low threes ERA. I've got projections almost 5 ERA. His whips are all over the place. So, he's just incredibly hard to project. All said and done, I have him worth like $1. He's got a good strikeout rate. I just don't know what the innings are. How many, will the last 6 innings get wins? I have him at about 8 wins. I can't really bank on a great ERA first year back. So I have him as just $1 player. He's going for on average $9 in a 15-team format. And I played actually an auction last night in the NFBC, and he went for $10. I'm not willing to take a $10 risk on him. I mean, I bought Luis Castillo for like $9 last night. I'd much rather have that risk than I want to take on Imai. So just from the value alone, absolutely not. I'm more likely to have Caglione than Imai if that's the cost.
That's fair. That's fair. And I originally, in my podcast last week with Nick's picks, I did talk a lot how much I was in on MI. And my thing is now is that you know, I think you're allowed to change your mind a little bit. And for me, I think the cost, at least in a draft scenario, on pick 175, might be okay. I don't know how much more.
So let me ask you a question. Here's how I know that he's a terrible pick for me, at least. What's you're bidding $10 to get him? You're bidding $10, which is it's about an 11th round pick 150 in the NFBC. What kind of upside are you looking for? Like, I'm already projecting him for 150 innings, 150 strikeouts, 4.25 ERA. I mean, are you thinking he's going to be a 3.35 ERA with like a 110 whip? Like, what upside are you looking for him?
Well, for me, what I like is that so Amai has had a high strikeout rate in Japan, and Japan as a league as a whole has a lower strikeout rate as a whole as over here in America. And then also he has two secondaries that have a 40% whiff rate on them. And so I do think that there's swing and miss potential. Any kind of regression on those whiffs might maybe 10% drop is still a 30% whiff rate on a couple of offerings that I like. And then I also think that he's shown that he's a good ground ball pitcher, induces soft contact as well. So those are things that I think will help the ratios. And I'm a believer in the Astros pitcher development as well. Astros have had an uncanny ability to get the most out of their arms. If we look at Brandon Walter last year, Colton Gordon, AJ Blubach, these guys seemingly come out of nowhere and they perform. And the Astros went up and they spent it wasn't like an exuberant contract, but they spent some money on MI. And I think that at any time an organization like the Astros do that, then I think that should be a sign that there is a high level of confidence.
I'm just worried it'll take a year for that. And, I know his walk rate has been going down, but I mean, even just like 3 years ago, he had like a 14-15% walk rate. So I just see the whip staying high. I can't imagine him being like a sub 3.75 ERA in his first crack at everything. I could be wrong, but if he would have to achieve like a sub those numbers just to actually make up his value, like I don't see you making money on the $10. In fact, you can lose it very easily, right? If his ERA goes over 4, even with an excellent 25% strikeout rate, you're still going to lose your money on that. So to me, there are just better risks to take than him on getting the upside, which I guess his upside to me is like a $10-15 player. Why am I paying 10 to get it?
Right. No, I get you. I totally understand the downside here. I do. And I do agree in the sense that, in the first year in the majors might be a little more volatile. So he might be a better dynasty league pick, a first year player draft kind of guy, than a redraft one. So I'll give you that. I do think in a dynasty league he is more valuable. And I get the risk as well. And maybe I got my orange colored glasses on with the Astros taking them. But I just feel like it's the same thing like I mentioned with Mike Burrows, even though Mike Burrows is a lot less of a risk because he's going way later and I'm sure they're a lot cheaper in auction leagues. They spent the money on them, they're taking the risk, and maybe I got a little bit too much faith in the Astros, maybe a little bit too much faith in their abilities to get the most out of MI. But that's kind of where I am on it. But I totally understand the risk. And I totally understand why some people would be out. I totally get it. I really do. Gotcha. All right, so we'll move on to the lowest volatile bat. And it's kind of a no shock to anybody. A little dude named Corbin Carroll. He's going as the eighth overall pick, the third outfielder. What are your thoughts on Carroll if he's worth his current cost?
Yeah, so Carroll is a guy who I have not previously drafted all that much, but the volatility number just really goes to show that he's so super stable, and he might even have even a higher upside in power, I'd say. Now, we didn't talk yet about the ATC metric of skew. Skew actually shows some upside potential, and it looks like he can actually beat the ATC projection. So I look at that and I say, you know what? Add a couple of dollars to what Carroll does. Now, in an auction format, I don't usually end up taking these guys because they go way over. They go like $10 over. But in a draft format, I am totally comfortable taking Corbin Carroll. And to me, he should be gotten after the first couple of no-brainers like Judge, Robbie Witt, stuff like that. Depending upon if you want to take a pitcher, Scoopal Skeens, you can go that way. But he really is somebody who you can really lock down. No-brainer mid-first rounder for me, and there's not much to say other than he's awesome.
Yeah. Yeah, no, I've got no pushback. I love Corbin Carroll. If he's sitting there at pick 7 or 8 in a draft, I'm smashing that button all day long. I mean, just like you said, he's safer than what a lot of people may realize. That volatility number that you provide in ATC shows that, and you even mentioned the positive skew as well. I've got no pushback on Corbin Carroll. The dude is a stud, and and if I'm in the middle of the draft order, I want to have a lot of Corbin Carroll. The only thing that will stop me is if I'm like 1 or 2, or if I'm down at 10 or 11. And my God, if he drops to me at like 10 or 11, we'll be overjoyed to take him there. All right. So not much there on Carroll. Let's move on to the next lowest. The lowest volatility arm is Griffin Jacks, the closer now in, I'm blanking, Tampa. He's in Tampa. Yeah. Yeah. So what are your thoughts on him?
Yeah, it's funny. That's one of these things that I wouldn't expect Griffin Jacks to have the lowest volatility of any pitcher. I guess he does. I would say that he's a little bit more volatile than you'd think, not in terms of his ratio or skills, which is what this is saying, but I think in terms of the save. Now, you say he's the closer in Tampa, but is he? Tampa in the past has known to have multiple closers, and I don't even know that he's the guy. There's also in Tampa, there's also Edwin Uceda that might grab a high number of shares. Garrett Clevenger, who might grab a couple of saves. I'm not quite sure he's going to grab all the saves, but we are projecting him only for 14 saves. So I guess projections all agree that he's the split closer. That's what it tells you. Now, should I buy him? Yeah, I think he's worth a dart. He's going in the 13th round, which is not crazy. If I needed a closer at that point, I would be comfortable taking him. I do like the skills. He's got last year, he's got a 35% strikeout rate and a very manageable walk rate. So I think the skills are there. He was a little bit lucky last year. His BABIP was 375. And his strand rate was only 70, so a little bit lucky on there. But I mean, strikeouts are just there. I mean, he had almost 100 strikeouts last year. So buy the skills, get a half a saves, a share. Again, if you're buying him for a dart and expecting half the saves, that might be true in Tampa. So I think it's just a mathematics play, and if it fits your roster, then go ahead.
Yeah, absolutely. Again, no pushback here. I mean, I think you're right. We don't know if he really is the closer in Tampa. You mentioned Edwin Uceta. I love Edwin Uceta. I love the strikeout and the swing and miss potential of his arsenal. I hope that one day Edwin Uceta gets the shot to be the closer somewhere, because I think he has the upside to be like top 10, top 9. The closer in baseball if it goes to the right situation. He's just an incredibly talented arm. You also mentioned Clevenger. He is another guy that I think that could take away some shares, some saves away from Jax. And that's the thing, it's a great thing in real baseball, but hurts your fantasy team when a team has a deep bullpen like Tampa Bay does, where they've got so many options they can go to late in the game. So you can totally see Griffin Jax coming in the 7th or 8th inning in a fireman situation to get them out, and then they still have bullets to use later in the game. So it's great for real baseball, but Tampa Bay's manager, it doesn't care about your fantasy team. He's going to do to win the game. And so that's the downfall to taking Griffin Jax. In a 15-team league, I might be looking to get more safer options earlier in the draft to fortify my saves category. In a 12-team setup, I might be more willing to wait on a closer and pick up someone like Jax, because the waiver wire will be so bountiful in the offseason that I don't think I'm going to spend too much capital in the preseason on an elite closer. Maybe take one, but outside of that, though, I might be more bargain bin shopping in a shallower format. Any additional thoughts on Jap?
No, not much more to say. I think you covered it.
Gotcha, man. Before we move on, are there any other players that have a high or low volatility that you think that are worth discussing, if they might be more or less valuable than what they're being drafted at now?
I haven't really combed everything for volatility, but I can tell you that there are some closers like Jeff Hoffman who also have very low volatility. I guess when you have projections saying, "Yep, he's a 30 save guy," "Yep, he's a 30 save guy," there you go. Juan Soto has a pretty in the first round. Juan Soto has a pretty low volatility, so people pretty much agree he's awesome. So I definitely think that is fine. And Kyle Tucker is another one as well. People agree he's pretty good. So those are interesting.
Yeah, especially in LA. I mean, that may be infuriating as a fan, but as a fantasy baseball manager, that's all right, sweet. That's like RBI and run opportunities all day. So I'm totally with you, especially on Soto as well. So let's move on to Skew. SKEW. Skew is the what's not an abbreviation? That's the actual word there. So what is Skew? And you call it a third order statistic. What is that?
I guess it is short for skewness, technically.
Skewness. Oh, okay.
Yeah. Gotcha. But as we said, that the standard deviation covers the squared of something. Skewness covers the third power. It's without getting to the complicated formula, you're dealing with seeing the difference between the term cube versus the mean. So that measures the skewness of something. Now, skewness is important to understand. If you have a lot of parts that make up the distribution and they're all here, but there's one outlier all the way much lower, that is what's called negatively skewed. And if you would have had removed that part, you would see the average go up, right? It's just one outlier. We know that if everybody agrees but one, it's the old Sesame Street thing. One of these things is not like the other, right? You can actually disregard that one or give it less weight, and it would pump up the average. Now, skewness, again, negative would be good because you're getting rid of that negative term, but I don't want to see like negative being good, so I flipped it around. So skew is the negative of the skewness. So a positive skewed means there's an outlier low, get rid of he's better, and a negative skew would mean there's some outlier that's saying he's awesome. If you get rid of him, his average would go down. So that is what skewness is.
Awesome, awesome, and this is a great way to quantify kind of the risk of an aggregate here, is being able to say, all right, well, what is the how do you quantify those outliers? And this is a wonderful way to do that. So let's get into specific players here. A guy with the highest positive skew. Now, reminder, these are the highest positive skew of guys that are going within the top 300 of picks. So there are a lot of like bench guys, or a lot of guys are going way late or probably going to hold very little fantasy value that might have better skews, but these are like the main guys and most relevant dudes that have the highest skew. And the one I found was Bryce Harper has one of the highest positive skews. He's currently going ADP 51.56, the fourth first baseman. What are your thoughts on Mr. Harper?
Right now, one thing also to note about skew is that even though it's a third order statistic versus the second order statistic, I found that there is a very good correlation in identifying undervalued players with players who have quite a high skew and players who have quite a negative skew. It is correlated with finding people who are overvalued. So I use some of these risk metrics to adjust the pricing, and skew actually plays a little bit more weight in everything. Bryce Harper right now I have is projected at about par value, meaning he's going in the fourth round. He's worth fourth round value, but the skew tells me he's got some positivity. Last year, he was only a $16 player. He only played 500 at bats. But again, if he gets back to full playing time, which he absolutely can, he's a 30 type dollar player. And there's some projections that have him low because they're seeing some of his negative stuff. Well, last year was a negative value that impacts the skew as well. So Harper, I think, is a player that I think we know what his true talent is. We know he's a high 270s hitter. We know he can steal like a dozen bases. We know he can hit 25, 30 homers. So I think we know what the true talent is. And we know that he does have some upside above it. To me, it's really about the process risk for him. So unfortunately, you can't control process risk. You do get injured. Again, I'm comfortable taking him where he is for par value. I'm more likely to take him in a draft. In an auction, I'm a little bit less likely to take him because I don't really see much positive value. But maybe with the skew, with the very positive skew, maybe I'll think more and maybe I'll give him an extra buck.
Yeah, no, and this is, I think he's adequately valued. I don't think I'm pushing him much more because of the playing time risk, because we haven't seen him put together a full season, so I can't push him up more. But you know what? If I'm sitting there late top 50 around pick 45, 50 or so, and he's sitting there and I haven't filled my first base spot, yeah, absolutely. You can't really go wrong. You know what you're getting with Harper on a per game basis, and if he can put together like a 650 plate appearance season, then you're going to get a better return on your investment.
Yeah. And by the way, he's pretty well distributed statistically. I mean, he gets a whole mess of runs and RBIs. He gets a ton of homers, and he does contribute like a dozen steals, which is not nothing. So he's very nicely categorically spread, and high batting average is tough to find also, and he's got a very good batting average. So, and if you're in an OBP league, he's worth more. By the way, I mean his walk rate is outstanding. So if you're in an OBP league, like he's third round at least.
Yeah, and I'm in a dynasty league that counts OBP, and I'm currently in discussion to try and pick up Harper because this might be one of my first year I'm going to be a contender, and so OBP he's an incredible value. So I'm hoping to maybe get in on my winning gravy train with Harper, a boost up my OBP. So absolutely, man, I love me some Bryce Harper and OBP. I think he's adequately valued in standard 5x5 formats, sitting there at his ADP. I'm picking him up all day. All right, the highest positive skew is a surprise to me, at least, given, but it also could this have to do with kind of how the projections might be a little wonky, is Roki Sasaki. Currently going 219 and NFBC draft champions, the 64th starting pitcher. What are your thoughts on Mr. Sasaki?
Yeah, so Sasaki is somebody who ATC doesn't project well, but the skew shows that he has upside from that, right? So he's somebody that ATC actually projects as, like a bench player in 15-team leagues, but with upside, right? And I think that actually is accurate because there are some projections that have him as he's awesome, and most of the projections have him as meh. right? He had a 4.5 ERA almost last year, so and a 1.43 WHIP in limited innings. Is he going to be a starter? Is he going to be a reliever? We don't know. So projections are, a little bit muted on that. But, some projections are like, no, he's going to be the 5th starter. He's going to be awesome. The strikeout rate is going to be awesome. So again, he's a guy that we don't know too much about in terms of the role. I'm good with taking him in the bench round because if he stinks, then you cut him. And he does have upside. I mean, if you buy him, and right now it's still January, and he becomes a starter, well, then you got somebody who could give quality and could give strikeout rate. I mean, if he pitches 130 innings, you can have 140 strikeouts just from that on a bench round. So I have no problem taking him. And if he's available, unless I have some other need on my team, yeah, he's definitely a starting pitcher that I would throw a dart on.
Yeah, I get it. And what you mentioned there about this dropping him if it doesn't work out is something that I'm going to try and utilize this a little bit more in terms of like last year, I fell in love with my late round picks and I was hesitant to drop them. Maybe this year with my late round picks, I'm going to pick guys like Roki Sasaki that have kind of a clear drop line. Like, all right, I'm going to take Roki, but if it's not working out early, I can feel safe dropping him and picking up, the next hot streamer or whatever it is. Because I just fell in love too much by late round picks. I'm like, he's going to turn around. And then the end of April, beginning of May, I'm just so far behind already that it makes it difficult. So I think that's a very, and I've heard Nick Pollock talk about it a lot as well. Just making sure you're picking guys late that you feel comfortable dropping, you don't fall in love with, because I'm very guilty of that, where I was like, man, I love this guy. He's going to eventually turn it around. And then when he does it, and I too much faith in them.
I
so
mean,
I love that play.
You're better off having guys that you love than guys that you don't care about around your team. But yeah, the way you play it, you need to be able to drop guys that you didn't acquire for a large amount if they're not working out. Remember that.
Absolutely. Anybody with a positive skew that you want to mention real quick before we move on to the negative skew, guys?
Some other guys with positive skew, Terry Skubal for some reason has a positive skew, and that's surprising because he's projected so high. So that's interesting to know that he's definitely the clear number one. You get a guy like Shane McClanahan who, is projected at a certain value, but has that ability to go higher. So you do get positive skew on him. Same thing like Tyler Glass now. So, you're going to get those type of guys like that. So those are interesting.
Gotcha. Right on. Moving on to the negative skew. A guy with the highest negative skew, I guess, or the lowest negative skew, however you want to term that, is Lou Rob, recently being traded to your Mets. What are your thoughts on Lou Rob?
Well, sad for me to see Acuna go because our family liked him. We went to a game out in Scranton on our road trip this year through New York, seeing minor league games, and we saw him. We said hello to him, and he was doing well in the winter ball. And it's sorry to see him leave, but I get the trade. Robert is a professional major leaguer center fielder, and the Mets haven't had that, and looking for him. And Acuna is not a crazy price, and he can't even play right now in the Mets, where the Mets have like 5 different second basemen they can you can use. I think Luis Robert, I think it's not about the talent. I think it's more about, will he actually stay on the field healthy? He has not had more than 400 at-bats in the last 3 years, and he has not had more than 400 at-bats in any other than 1 year in 2023. He didn't have that many at-bats in 7 years prior. So, it's a question of him staying on the field. The guy can steal bases, which goes with the new Mets philosophy. Will he be a 220 hitter? Will he be a 230 hitter? Will he be a 260 hitter? I'm not sure, but he definitely is a major league outfielder and will definitely help. And if he's batting 7th or 8th for the Mets, great. You're not going to do much better for that. Hopefully though, his attitude, I heard he's not a great clubhouse guy, and the Mets have been bringing in good clubhouse guys. So hopefully that fits. I don't know. Do I like him as a player? I'm not sure. I don't know if I'm going to root for him yet. We'll see. As far as buying him, he's not going at a discount currently. He's going in the 9th round. He does have a broad base of statistics, but I don't like the 230 average. That can kill you. He only had 14 homers each of the last 2 years. I want somebody in the 9th round with a little bit more of that. So And will he be batting third or seventh? That's a big deal. Because if he's batting third, the RBIs and runs are going to be there. If he's batting seventh, it's not going to be. So, I'm really unsure of that. So right now, for me, I'm not in on him as a fantasy pick. But the more rumblings we see and how he performs in spring training could change my mind.
Yeah, no, I get you. You made a really cogent point there about the batting order. A point that I kind of didn't really think too much of. It might be a situation where he starts out low, and then if he performs, he earns his way up. But I think just in general, for me with Luis Robert, is I got to see it first. He's going to pick 130 right now in these leagues, and I cannot pay that price for someone who's a question mark, not only in playing time and spot in the batting order, but also, we got to see him do one of two things. He either has to get the barrel rate back up to the 15% range we saw, I think, in 2023, 2022, whatever year that was where he kind of broke out. He either need to get that up, or he's got to get the overall contact rate back up above 70%, because you can have a horrible contact rate if the barrel rate is at 15%. But if the barrel rate is going to be at the 9 or 10% range where it has been, the overall contact rate needs to improve. So he's got to do one of those two things for me to be in on him. And until he does, I can't pay the price. I just can't do that. Now, if he falls to pick 175 or something like that, then all right, I'm in, because he's at least going to give you. I think he's the steals are going to be there, and I think he's going to have at least some power to go with it. And then you can kind of take the batting average hit with a later, cheaper pick. But as of right now, I can't take him at the current cost. So I'm kind of with you on that.
Yeah.
Absolutely. Let's see here. Now, one intriguing catch here. You mentioned Judge earlier. He has a negative skew of negative 2.20, one of the worst skews per ATC projections. Does that give you any pause at all, or is that just kind of something you don't not going to worry too much about?
Looks like his skew is now down to only about negative 1.5 in my latest run. That'll probably hit later this week, so that's got to
Oh,
look better. But yeah, that's good. It gives me pause a little bit. I mean, I don't think Aaron Judge is really an issue, and if there's a one big projection out there, the reason why he probably has negative skew is because there's one really big projection where somebody has him projected for like 59 homers, which is probably too much anyways. We know it's within his arsenal, so I'm not, because I probably know the makeup of why he's negatively skewed, doesn't detract from the fact that I think he's pretty good. His volatility is not horrific. It's at 3, which is sort of average for players. So, so it's not like, oh my God, we don't know anything about Aaron Judge. Doesn't bother me. The guy is almost a 50 home run hitter at, perennially. And, he's now almost a 300 hitter. I mean, he obviously crushed that last year, and his runs and RBIs are through the roof. So I don't have any pause about drafting Aaron Judge. Although I personally, if I'm drafting, I like Bobby Witt better for the category mix. There's an argument on Shohei Ohtani, although for me, I actually would probably draft people Witt, Judge, Ohtani in that order.
Okay, that's interesting. For me, those three guys are very close. I don't think you can really go wrong. I'm kind of warming up to Witt, sliding up to 1 or 2 than I have in previous years. I'm still kind of internally debating this because it is very close. Any of those guys could be the number one guy at the end of the year, and I don't think me or you would bat an eye, and it'd be shocking at all. So I don't think there's a wrong answer, which is nice, but at the same time, you got to make sure you get it right. You got to make sure you get the most value out of that pick. So you got to make sure you're right. And these skew metrics can be kind of a tiebreaker. Like, all right, well, if I'm going to go with this guy, then I want more positive metrics to lean on, to be a little more comfortable on. And so for me, I'm warming up to Bobby Witt being a 1 or 2 draft pick than I have in the past. Because last year, I thought it was firmly Ohtani, Judge 1, 2. This year, I might be warming up to the idea of switching up that order some. So, that's to be determined. I'm still, but like I said, I don't think there's a wrong answer here. And for me, just seeing that negative skew for such a big name, I thought it was worth at least kind of mentioning to get your thoughts on that. Any other negative skew guys that you're intrigued by before we move on?
I'll give you a few. It's just worth discussing. But Ben Rice has a pretty big negative skew, and that's understandable. I think people are way, way too high on the guy. He does have, a little bit of downside. Again, he's fresh into it, so that's a word of caution. I think that's valid for him. You also have a guy, Byron Buxton, who's got a very negative skew. That's a word of caution, as that guy can just, get injured at any point. So I think that's pretty instructive. I'll give another one here. Andres Munoz has a very negative skew. That tells me that caution. There's a little bit of disagreement on whether he stays as the closer, health concern, or whatever. I think he's great. Munoz is fine, but maybe drop him $1 or one spot, and maybe draft another closer ahead of him if you're worried about the ATC metric.
Yeah, yeah, and one thing I'll add on to Munoz is that I don't think it happened much last year, but the year before last, I had him drafted a lot in 2024, and I noticed that he wasn't used in the ninth as often as I was expecting him to be. Now, last year, I think that corrected some, and I think he got more opportunities. But this year, it's going to be a full year of Matt Brash. You're going to have a deep Seattle bullpen, so I can see Munoz being used a little more earlier than the ninth. So there might be a little more risk there with Munoz than it has in the past. And he's going really early. He's very expensive. I don't know if I'll be drafting a premium draft pick on a closer that I'm not 100% sure is going to be the dude. So yeah, no, I'm with you on Nunos. A couple of guys here that are close to a zero skew, meaning that what I assume means that you're very confident that in what the projections are saying, because it's not a whole lot of variation here.
Yeah, well, zero skew means that there's the same number of projections up and the same number of projections down around the ATC average. So
Okay.
no information to learn from that.
Gotcha. And the first name, the hitter here is 0.02, almost zero, is Adolis Garcia, going to pick 250 as a 60th outfielder. Are you in or out on Garcia?
I mean, Adelise does provide a nice range of categories, and if you need that kind of, I just need some value. I don't need to make up any categories, and you're okay with maybe his batting average is a little bit poor. I mean, he's been like a 220s hitter the last couple of years. So if you're okay with taking a batting average hit and you want to just fill a couple of the other categories, then he's helpful. And he's going actually at a bargain. He's going the 16th round in NFBC drafts, and he's worth a couple rounds higher than that. So to me, Adolis Garcia is somebody that I'd be okay with if the makeup of my team needed it. Yeah.
Yeah, absolutely. And his Statcast numbers are all still really awesome. Great launch angle, good exit velocities, barrel rates, all that lovely stuff, and 10 plus steals to boot. And so and then batting in Philly, he's out of Texas home ballpark. I think is also a reason why he might be a little undervalued.
Are you concerned about his playing time though? I was talking about him today with my fantasy baseball partner Ruben Guy, and we're just a little concerned with his playing time. Is he gonna lose some play starts to Marsh, or is
Was it Justin
what
Crawford? I think is there going to be in center field. Marsh.
is Crawford gonna be there? Nick Castellanos, what's he gonna do? Is he still be in the team? So I'm just cautious. Is he gonna get full time at bats? I mean, he only had 500 at bats last year. Maybe with some injury or so.
If they don't deal with Castellanos, then I can see a concern there. But from what I've heard, and it hasn't happened yet. From my understanding, is that the Phillies want to get rid of Castellanos. They don't want him there no more. There's been a lot of talk about how much the Phillies are trying to jettison him, but those talks have quieted down over the last month or so. I haven't heard a whole lot, so I don't know if that's actually going to happen.
Well,
So if Castellanos stays,
Yeah, so if that's the case, the projections actually here could be light on his playing time, because while he's on the roster, he's going to be grabbing some at bats from the playing time projection. And if the Phillies are trying to get rid of him, I say that these playing time projections are probably light, and so he's probably even a little bit more of a bargain than you even think. So that's a thumbs up for him.
Yeah, absolutely. I think a lot has to do with what the Phillies do with Mr. Castellanos. All right. The last name on the list here is Brian Wu. He is a near zero skew at negative 0.02. 10th overall starting pitcher, going 43rd overall. Thoughts on Wu?
So I drafted him last night. He's a low-end SP1, I think. He's obviously shown a great base of skills. I mean, each of the last 2 years, he's had a sub-1 whip, which is incredible. And that's even with a really crappy last couple of months. And he's had a sub-3 ERA, okay? Strikeouts are there. He had almost 200 strikeouts last year, even with the crappy start there. So you're getting a sub-3.5 ERA. You're getting a 1 whip. And Seattle's a good team, and they've retooled. So you're going to get some wins. He had 15 wins last year. To me, if he's healthy, and I know he's had some health concerns in the past, he's definitely right up there as an FP1. And you don't have to pay first round value for him as you do for schemes. And in an auction, it's even better. I mean, I bought him for like $29 yesterday. I was hoping to buy him for a little bit cheaper, but everyone's going hot. You have to get somebody. So to me, I own him. So I know that I will be getting from Brian Wu. So again, health is my only concern. The skills are phenomenal there.
Yeah, great whiffs on the fastball, slider, sweeper as well. I am going to have him as my ninth starting pitcher in my rankings. Like the low end SP1 kind of dude. Health is obviously a concern, but health is a concern for the vast majority of pitchers already anyways. And so, like you said, pitchers are being paid for at a premium right now, not only in auction leagues, but in standard snake draft leagues as well. So you're going to have to reach up a little bit more than you may want to get your guy. And Brian Wu will be one of those guys that I will be targeting later in the top 50. And if I can get him outside the top 40 at his current ADP, I would be ecstatic. I may reach in the 30s for him. I have to see what arms are still there. But that's draft price, I think, is pretty damn good. So any additional thoughts before we move on?
No, that's it.
Okay, right on. So let's go to the last volatility metric here, and that's ATC Dimension. That is abbreviated DIM. Give us a little breakdown of what this means.
I said dimension is, the easiest way to explain it is we talk about somebody as a 5-tool player. He's a 5-dimensional player, multi-dimensional, right? And if you're a 1-dimensional player, then it means you do one of only thing. Well, that's exactly what it is. If you are a 1-dimensional guy, you really only do one thing. If your only thing is stolen bases, you're going to be a very low-dimensional player. If you're spread out categorically, and you're 5-dimensional. It's the spread of the categories is what dimension represents, and it's on a scale of literally 1 to 5. So if you're 4 and above, you are absolutely fantastic dimensional. There's nobody who's going to be 1-dimensional. It's going to read like a 2.2 is going to be your very small dimensional, because guys who steal a lot, they'll either get on base or they'll score runs or something like that. So that's what it is.
Right, a pretty simple breakdown, man. It makes a lot of sense. And another way in which you can quantify this aggregation risk is determining which guys are just way, like I said, way too one-dimensional. In these ways, you can actually try and find a value later in the draft. If you are very weak on a particular category, then some of these guys that have lower dimensions are where you're going to find these guys. Let's begin with the highest dimension player, a guy that has the most, not say most production across the board, but it has balanced out production. That's Ramon Laureano going 231 in NFBC Draft Champion Leagues, the 55th outfielder. What are your thoughts on Laureano?
Yeah, Laureano is absolutely very well categorically split.
Yeah.
Laureano is another one like Adolis Garcia. I think it's actually very similar in stature, that he's going to get you a couple steals. He's going to get you a bunch of homers. He's going to get you runs and RBIs. His average is not going to be crazy bad. He actually was pretty good last year, 281 average, and we're projecting for 245, which is more what he's done in his career. No, again, Laureano is a guy, at a lease that really fit. Getting a 16th round that's worth a couple rounds higher than that. So thumbs up on Laureano. I'll probably have a few shares of him here and there.
Yeah, ditto. And the big thing with him last year is that he, 2024 was very much a weak side platoon guy, didn't have great numbers against righties. He got that turned around last year, was really good against both lefties and righties. And so I don't have that platoon fear with him anymore. A guy with the lowest DIM, not a surprise to anybody, is Chandler Simpson, currently going 163, the 36th outfielder. What are your thoughts on Simpson?
By the way, the fact that he has the lowest dimension, and his dimension is 1.4, which is absolutely crazy. If you had to guess yourself what do you think the player is? You might actually come up with Chandler Simpson yourself, right? So the Mets actually fits the description. The dude is Billy Hamilton. I mean, it's pretty much that. I'm projecting him for like 1 homer, maybe, and that's probably an inside the park homer if I had to guess. No RBIs. I mean, I might project Ariel Cohen for more RBIs than him. Good batting average, which gives you the half a dimension there. Again, it's a one-dimensional guy. I don't love picking up one-dimensional guys, especially where you have to pay bid value. He's going in the 12th round. Billy Hamilton was useful when you bought him in the 17th, 18th round. He's not as useful when you have to pay 12th round value for him. I highly doubt I'm actually going to be buying Chandler Simpson because he's just not going to do it. And again, he had 44 stolen bases last year. I guess I'm pretty sure he's going to steal 40 this year as well. So I don't think there's a risk to him, and he'll get enough playing time to do that. But again, he's going to hurt you in so many other categories. So you've got to be, if you were extremely strong in the power and you have plenty of RBIs and that's all you've done, sure, he'd fit my team. I'd be willing to go the extra buck. If I was desperate for steals, I would go for him. But in general, all things being equal, he probably doesn't fit my blank roster, and you probably have to pay too much for him. So he's probably not going to be on many teams, but you never know with him. I'm not afraid to take him because I think I understand his profile. He's like Luis Arias, not as helpful when you're just very small dimensional. And by the way, that's why you have the ATC dimensional statistic. It just tells you these are guys that are harder to use. It's much easier to use Laureano than it is to use Simpson.
Absolutely. And I think you hit the nail on the head earlier when you said, depending on your previous draft picks, if you're just all in on power and RBI early in the draft and you have virtually no steals, then okay, you might have to reach up for a Simpson, a Jose Caballero, or someone like that to get those steals because they're incredible per game steals basis. I mean, Caballero could play like 3 games a week and get you 5 steals. And same thing with the Simpson. This incredible speed to burn. You're going to get them, but I'm only getting him if I make a mistake early on and like I maybe accidentally auto pick or I'm not paying attention and I just get a bunch of power early on and a bunch of guys that just have no steals, then I'm like, oh, crap. You can make up for it with the Simpson, but that's the only way. It's the only scenario which I'm taking Simpson at this price. If he falls to me to like pick, let's see, is he at 160? So if he falls to like 225 or something like that, I might just go ahead and just take him. And then maybe he can be a nice trade chip. If it's a trade leak, he can be a nice little trade chip later on. Someone who's struggling in steals, I can jettison him off kind of thing. But like, I cannot imagine me having many, if any, shares of Simpson, especially at this price. And that's an expensive price to pay just for steals. So we'll move on to the next highest dim guy, as arm. The highest dim arm is going to be Shane Bieber. He is currently going 157 as a 48th starting pitcher. What are your thoughts on Mr. Bieber?
So, by the way, I think dimension is less important for pitchers. I mean, I describe them because remember, the categories are wins and saves. You're going to have the one-dimensional category guys are usually going to be the closers because they get a lot of saves, don't get a lot of wins, strikeouts are a little bit low, right? So I don't think it's as helpful a statistic, although it makes sense. Shane Bieber is, spread out. He gets you some wins. He gets you an amount of strikeouts, fine ratios. And I guess he's in the middle because his innings are sort of mid, right? We can't project for 180 innings, but we want to project them for more than 70 innings. So it sort of gets a mid view. I don't like taking guys back from injury. I mean, if he went cheap enough, then I'd throw a dart at him. Right now, you'd have to grab him in about the 12th round. So a little bit too much for my blood for the risk.
Yeah. And the thing is, at the end of the year, we found out he dealt with some fatigue. And the last report that I saw was that he is most likely going to be ready for spring training, but there hasn't been anything definitive on that front. So I need a clarification on that for him, for me to be more in on him. I don't know how much I would bump him up, but it would be nice to get that clarity. Because the last thing we heard was that he had the fatigue and it's most likely he'll be ready for spring training, but they didn't give you any guarantee. So that's a little concerning for me, especially somewhere you'll be picking at one of your top 50 starters. I need a little more safety than that on Bieber. And so since you already mentioned, because I'm glad you said that about dimension not being a one of the more important stats to look at for pitchers, because the guy with the lowest dimension is Tariq Skubal. And so I'm glad you said that, because that kind of answered my question. I was like, Skubal? Really? And so I want to get I just get your thoughts real quick on Skubal.
Yeah, I mean, the low dimension is because, he just a 0 in saves. He's got an unbelievable amount of strikeouts. So, the level of his strikeouts to the level of his wins are just going to be okay, good, but not out of this world. His strikeouts are out of this world. I'm projecting 230 strikeouts. So just because he's he's spread out, that gives him more dimension. Again, for pitchers, it's not that much of an important thing. Skubal's awesome. He's the number 1 pitcher, and that's pretty much it. He's been a sub-3 pitcher for the last couple of years, sub-1 whip for the past couple of there, and he'll get you the wins. He'll get you an unbelievable amount of strikeouts. The dude is awesome. I mean, there's not much more to say that he's the number 1 pitcher. The question is whether you should draft him number 5 or number 10. That's pretty much the only question, and that's more of a game theory strategy thing. But the pitcher is awesome.
Absolutely, man. And I'm glad we got those thoughts on pitching, because when I saw that, I was like, all right. And I knew the saves were low, but I was like, why is that them so low? So I'm glad you're able to explain that for me and the listeners, because that would
his skew, we mentioned his skew is +3. So I mean, if because somebody is like, okay, he'll regress a little bit, he'll regress a lot. So we got to think about regression, but the positive skew is really the thing you should take from it. The guy is awesome.
Yeah, and I mentioned this before, and not on this podcast, but in the past, about how data kind of tells a complete story. You can't just look at one thing. You got to take everything into account. And I think the same thing is true by looking at how volatility, skew, and dimension, about how they all interact. So someone might have a high volatility but a positive skew, or a low dimension and a positive skew, or something along those lines, or the vice versa. You know what I mean? Like a high dimension but a negative skew, or anything along those lines. And so you got to really look at all together. You can't just look and focus in on one thing. I think data as a whole tells a story. It tells a complete story, where you can, of course, people might come up with different narratives for the same numbers, but that's the fun of baseball, and this is the fun of what we do, is that you can look at one set of numbers and I come up with a completely different assessment than what you may come up with. And that's where we have this debate in these podcasts for, to help help everyone sort it all out. And I think it's a lot of fun. And your ATC projection just adds another wrinkle to the analysis.
Yep. No, thanks. Yeah.
Absolutely, man. All right, man. So before I let you go, is there anything else you want to mention? Anything else you want to explain before we get out of here?
No, we did quite a lot. Definitely check out my projections if you haven't already. Fangraphs is really the home base, although we're also going to be on Yahoo. We're on we're on Rotoball, we're on RotoWire. Check those stuff out, and check out my Beat the Shift podcast. A lot of great auction strategy, a lot of great baseball strategy. We do undervalued players all day long. It's gonna be fun.
Absolutely. And you have the best intro song of any fantasy baseball podcast there is. I love it. Someone once described it as like an 80s talk show, and you just see you spinning and smiling, and there's Ariel Cohen, and I think that's a great visual for it. I love it, man. So, all right, like you said, Ariel Cohen of makes the creator of the ATC projections, host of the FSWA podcast of the year, Beat the Shift. You find him at ATCNY on Twitter or X or whatever you want to call it. So make sure you follow him. It was a great follow. All kinds of lovely information you put out there. So make sure you're checking out his work there. And the fact that you're on Yahoo and all these sites across the board, just shows how trusted your projections are. So definitely check all that out. Make sure you check me out at PaulW_34 on Twitter, no underscore on Bluesky at PaulW34. To get more of me, ask me questions, hit me up. Let's get ready for 2026 draft guide coming out at sportsethos.com. So make sure you get in on that. We help you with your drafts to get ready to win in 2026. And one last ask, please rate and subscribe to the podcast. Please rate and subscribe to the podcast. We'll help push it out. I will love you forever. I am Paul Williamson. He's Ariel Cohen of ATC Projections. This has been Fantasy MLB Today, a Sports Ethos presentation brought to you by FanDuel. Y'all have a good one.